Now, I'm glad to introduce our speakers, Tish Berard and Josh Jarvis. Tish is Senior Counsel of Trademarks for Velcro USA and its related companies, VELCRO Companies, based in Manchester, New Hampshire. She joined VELCRO Companies in 2018 as Legal Counsel for North America and was then promoted to Senior Counsel Trademarks. In this role, she enjoys protecting the iconic VELCRO brand and educating the public about the proper use of VELCRO Companies marks. Prior to her role at Velcro Companies, Tish was trademark counsel and subsequently vice president and general counsel for Hearts on Fire Company in Boston, Massachusetts for 10 years. Tish served as the president of INTA in 2018 and currently serves on its board of directors. Josh is the deputy chair of intellectual property at Foley Hoag, LLP, and a leader of its trademark, copyright, and unfair competition practice. Josh specializes in intellectual property matters with an emphasis on high-level trademark and copyright strategy, including prosecution, policing, licensing, and use, as well as related matters such as false advertisement, the right of publicity, commercial disparagement, etc. Josh specializes in complex domestic and worldwide brand protection strategies for U.S. and international companies and manages a portfolio of thousands of trademark filings across the globe. In addition to traditional trademark and copyright matters, Josh focuses on various issues specific to social media and the internet, from prosecuting and defending domain name disputes to overseeing the development of internal social media guidelines and best practices. Thank you so much, Josh and Tish. It's all you.
Thank you very much, Bree. Let's switch over to the slides here. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our panel. When it isn't what it is, maintaining brand distinctiveness and avoiding genericide. Like Bree said, I'm Josh Jarvis. I will not introduce myself again, except for that brief introduction, and I'm joined by Tish Berard. Hello, Tish.
Hi.
And this is us in better times. Let's just say. All right, let's move along. This is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about trademarks versus generic terms. What is a generic trademark? Genericide causes and effects, trademark and generic term selection, and we're going to spend a whole bunch of time on genericide prevention strategies. So let's start with trademarks versus generic terms. So we all know what a trademark is. It's a distinctive indicator of source. It's a brand for a type of good or service. A generic term, on the other hand, is the name of the thing. The word's primary significance is the relevant class or category of goods or services. So this will probably be old hat to most of you, who I assume are, in fact, trademark professionals. So we'll go through this quickly, but let's just collectively refresh our memories regarding the good old spectrum of trademark distinctiveness. So here at the top of the screen, we have 5 arrows that go from left to right, and which represent the strongest trademarks to the least protectable non-trademark terms. So our inherently strongest marks are fanciful marks. These are coined terms that have no clear connection to underlying goods and services. So Exxon for gasoline, Verizon for telecommunication services, Velcro for hook and loop fasteners. Arbitrary marks are next. These are also inherently strong. These are actual words whose meanings are not related to the subject goods or services. So Apple, the word Apple, not the image, for computers, camel for cigarettes. Camels do not actually smoke cigarettes. And Adobe for photo manipulation software. Next on the spectrum, we have suggestive marks. These are marks that suggest the nature of the goods and services, but which don't outright describe them. So these marks, too, are inherently distinctive and protectable. So the examples I have here are Microsoft for software for microcomputers, which is cute because no one has used the term microcomputer for several decades. Coppertone for sunscreen or suntan lotion. And Greyhound is kind of an old standby, which we use as a example of suggestive terms, because I assume because greyhounds are fast and buses are supposed to be fast, but I don't think it's actually that suggestive. I think it's probably more arbitrary, but we can debate that later. Finally, or next, we have merely descriptive terms. These are terms that merely describe the underlying goods or services. So on the screen, we have 3 marks that that began as merely descriptive: Poland Spring, Mini Wheats, and All Brand, but which have acquired distinctiveness, acquired trademark significance over time. That is possible with descriptive marks or descriptive terms. Finally, we have generic terms. These include hook and loop fasteners, computer, beer, e-commerce, insurance. These are generic terms and cannot be protected as trademarks for the goods and services they identify. The term and the product and service are essentially indistinguishable. Generic terms cannot be protected as trademarks no matter how widely they're used, at least so long as consumers recognize those terms as the generic identifier. So what is a generic trademark? Surprise, there's no such thing as generic trademarks. All trademarks are distinctive, as we just reviewed. Generic terms are not distinctive. They don't identify a single source and therefore cannot be trademarks. So there aren't descriptive marks, there aren't generic marks, there are descriptive terms and generic terms. However, sometimes people use the term generic trademark when referring to a former trademark that has become the common name for the product. The process of becoming generic has a colorful name: genericide. I just lost my place because I was so dramatic. I lost my place on the screen.
It's such an ominous word, isn't it?
It is. It is ominous. So when a former mark becomes the generic term for the product, it results in a loss of legal protection, and this loss of protection is ominously known as genericide. So let's turn to genericide causes and effects, and let's start with effects because that's the easy part. What happens when a trademark becomes generic? Well, everything that you would expect. The term is no longer eligible for trademark protection, no longer eligible for registration, for exclusive control. This is the case regardless of how long the former trademark was used. As a couple of examples that turned out differently, I have 2 cases up on the screen. On the one hand, we have Pilates versus Current Concepts. So in this case, the Southern District of New York held that Pilates had become generic for exercise facilities and exercise instruction. This is why you see Pilates classes all over the place, which are neither provided nor licensed by Joseph Pilates or his successors in interest. There's actually a guy named Joseph Pilates who came up with Pilates. So needless to say, if you would like to offer Pilates classes, you don't need to ask Joseph's estate. On the other hand, we have Elliott versus Google, where in 2017, the Ninth Circuit affirmed the lower court summary judgment determination that Google was not generic for search engine services. In this case, Elliott had argued that a large portion of the relevant use of the term was verb use, people Googling. The Ninth Circuit noted that this use doesn't really tell us anything about how the public primarily understands the word itself. So even if they're using the term as a verb, and irrespective of that grammatical function, customers might well still understand Google to be a trademark. So needless to say, Google remains a trademark to this day. So let's turn to the, before we turn to the causes of genericide, let's look at some examples of former US trademarks that you might recognize. So first I have Escalator, which was a brand for moving staircases. Tish, you want to talk about aspirin? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, aspirin is a unique one because depending on which country you're in, it can be generic or it can still actually function as a trademark. So I know of, at least in the country of Germany, aspirin is still a valid trademark that is recognized as such. And of course, in the United States, aspirin is a generic term for analgesics. So it really is dependent on the country that you're in. So a mark becoming generic doesn't necessarily mean that it's generic everywhere. It simply means it's generic in the jurisdiction in which it's found to be generic.
Exactly. So some other examples here that you may find amusing or sad. Kerosene for lamp oil, cellophane for transparent wrap, laundromat was a brand for washing machines, trampoline for elevated bouncing mats, linoleum for floor coverings, and teleprompter for television-based prompting apparatus, which you can tell why folks glommed on to teleprompter instead of the proper generic term. So now let's turn to causes of genericide. So the killing blow, of course, for genericide is that the consuming public no longer recognizes the mark as a mark. But how does that happen? Well, there are a few ways. The trademark owner itself might use the mark improperly, excessively, publicly. The trademark owner may not try or may be unable to stop competitors from using its mark, or the trademark owner fails to adequately educate the public such that there's widespread misuse by customers, by media, and so forth. So some indications and evidence that may point to genericide or the lack thereof include dictionary definitions. If the mark is in dictionaries, particularly without any indication of brand status, so no indication that's a trademark, no trademark symbol, no capital letter, that tends to indicate genericness rather than brand significance. Consumer surveys are sort of the gold standard of how to judge what the consuming public thinks about the word. If consumers recognize the mark as a mark, then it's probably a mark. It's a duck, it's a duck, it's a duck. The availability of appropriate generic terms for subject goods. So, moving staircase probably was not as catchy as the brand escalator, or it wasn't promoted alongside the brand escalator such that customers understood escalator to be the brand rather than just the word for the thing. So let's talk about nipping the specter of genericide in the bud before it appears. Fanciful marks, the strongest and most distinctive category of trademarks, are the most likely to succumb to genericide. Why is this? Well, new inventions or first to market inventions often have coined names. And when you have a coined name, you often, customers will often glom onto that coin name rather than any other terms that are kind of distributed with that name. Many brand owners, when they come up with a brand for a thing, haven't actually selected a separate generic term and may themselves consider the brand and the generic to be essentially indistinguishable because they're not talking to trademark lawyers. They're just like, this is the thing. Why do we need another word for the thing? And one reason for this is that the brand owners may in fact be relying on alternate IP protections. If you're coming up with a new invention, you're often focused on patent protection. So if you're focused on patent protection, you're relying on that to keep your competitors kind of out of your space. But patent protection obviously is inherently limited by time. And once the patent protection runs out, if you don't have an alternate means to protect the kind of brand name or the thing, or to identify your product and to distinguish it from others, then you're going to be out of luck. So in terms of prevention, companies spend an enormous amount of money on branding exercises. And that's fine, and they should, because they should pay us to come up with, to help them develop and clear protectable brands. But they should also be spending, for some companies and some products, the focus should also be on selecting an attractive generic term that they will essentially release into the wild alongside the brand. So you have a brand, you're satisfied that it's protectable, that the marketplace and registration risk is low, and you also you also develop a generic term that you're also comfortable that the risk is low, but you're comfortable with everyone else using as well. So that's a good idea. Enforcement and education is going to be easier at the beginning of a brand's life cycle than at the end. A lot of companies don't deal with these issues until it's too late, or until it's more difficult to deal with them. After the widespread success of a product, sometimes the name will take on a life of its own. And whatever metaphor you want, the horse leaving the barn, the train leaving the station, it's hard to catch the horse or turn the train around, or whatever, however you get that moving object back into the pen. Another way to prevent genericide is obviously proper trademark use. So just looking at some trademark use best practices, I mean, these are the same best practices for the best practices for avoiding genericide are the usual trademark use best practices. You don't use marks as nouns. You use them as proper adjectives. You don't use the mark as a verb. Use trademark symbols. Use trademark notices. So Tish, why don't you walk through some examples using the Velcro trademark?
Okay, so obviously, there's a wide spectrum of how you can use your trademark, and up here we have some examples of kind of the spectrum from bad to best. Bad, I think we all recognize that, using the mark without any kind of designation, any indicia of trademark use, it's not capitalized, it doesn't have the circle R, we're using it as a verb. Those are all examples of very bad trademark use. Even capitalizing the word without, again, indicating that it is a trademark with the circle R or a TM symbol, if that's appropriate. Again, the goal is to ensure that consumers are educated, and if you're not familiar with trademarks, we want to make sure that you are realizing that the word is a trademark. We're getting better, with the OK, because now we've at least added the generic term of fasteners, but once again, it really doesn't give that indicia of trademark of notoriety. Good, we now have the circle R in there. That's helpful. Better, we have it capitalized so that it really stands out. It's clear to a consumer or anyone else seeing it that it is something is different. And so the capitalization does help. Even better, now we're getting to, with it capitalized, the circle R, we use the word brand, and then we have the generic hook and loop fasteners. And then finally, the best is just even more distinctive logo with the V button in front of it and the word brand underneath it. So this just kind of gives you an idea of the spectrum. We also have our trademark guidelines that we give out for the public. They're on our website, as well as they're incorporated into any licenses, any documents with customers, anyone who is using our trademark. So most of these guidelines are the same as what Josh already talked about. Obviously, the first one, that you have to use it only in connection with genuine Velcro brand products, is clear. It's a trademark, it's indicia of source, and only those goods that come from Velcro Companies have the right to use the Velcro trademark with respect to those products. We've got the format here with the capitalization, the circle R. The word brand is an optional thing for most trademark users. It's not necessary to use that. But at Velcro Companies, we believe that that is a key component in helping to educate everyone, the consuming public, competitors, etc., and to remind them that the word Velcro is a trademark and it is an indicia of source. And so that's why we require, when you're using our trademark, Velcro, to use not only the capitalized letters for the word, for the trademark Velcro, use the circle R, but you also need to add the word brand so that it's very clear in case you can't see the circle R, in case you don't realize that capitalized letters are indicative of something else. The word brand is helpful and helps educate anyone to understand that the word Velcro is indeed a trademark. We also have a family of Vel prefix marks, and so we don't allow our licensees to come up with their own trademarks that incorporate or use the word or the prefix Vel in connection with the goods and services that Velcro Companies provides. We don't hyphenate or abbreviate the Velcro mark. And Josh, I think you can go to the next slide. We have a different format, obviously, if you're using our Velcro trademark in connection with a specific trademark for one of our specific products. The format is very similar. It's using the word Velcro, capitalized, circle R brand, and then the trademark capitalized circle R of the product, followed by the generic name. So it's Velcro brand one wrap straps, for example, as you see up here. We always use the trademark notice, the permission statement, of course. And then we make a distinction in number 7 because, of course, when Mr. de Mestral invented hook and loop fasteners, he came up with the fanciful word Velcro to use as his trademark to describe his particular brand of hook and loop. But he liked that word so much, he also called the company that. So we do give a bit of education to ensure that those who are using the word Velcro to describe our company, the company name, understands that it's just simply lowercase Velcro Companies. The uppercase circle R is really reserved for use with our products.
Thank you, Tish. So another way to help prevent genericide is to explore broader protections for the mark that may be at risk. So one way to associate the mark with a range of goods and one way is to associate the mark with a range of goods and services other than the original goods and services. So this is sort of an insurance policy, because a mark that becomes generic with respect to a single type of product may well not be generic at all. It may remain fanciful and distinctive with respect to a range of other products, and that association could conceivably pull an at-risk mark back from the brink, or at the very least, it could offer a suite of protections in a related field that would still give the mark a element of distinctiveness that prevents it from falling into true genericide. Another possible expansion tactic is, of course, geographical expansion. As Tish mentioned before with Bayer and aspirin, trademark rights are jurisdictional. Just because a term is at risk or even generic in the US, for instance, doesn't mean it's generic or even at risk elsewhere. Including everywhere in the world. So geographic expansion can provide, it's not so much an insurance policy, but it does provide, it provides a way for trademark rights to remain active and enforceable, even if they are not or no longer such in the US or certain other countries. Trademark policing and enforcement is, of course, part and parcel of trademark ownership generally. So it will come as no surprise that effective policing is also an important anti-genericide strategy. So in terms of traditional policing, all of the usual ideas and potential steps apply. And we don't need to discuss these at length because you're all probably familiar with them. We need to stop competitors from infringing. Famous brand owners, which may include a lot of brand owners that have genericide on the mind, need to be mindful of potential dilution issues. In terms of ways to go about this, you have cease and desist letters, civil actions, online marketplace takedowns, and so forth. When you're dealing with an at-risk mark, this can be tricky. It's much easier for aggressive brand owners to fall into a PR trap these days, because everyone is online. Everyone is actively communicating and sharing things that they receive. They're actively interacting with brands. So it's important to understand the audience and the overall threat presented by the infringement, and take that into account when you're crafting your demand correspondence. So, if a friendly or educational letter is preferable to an aggressive letter, that may in many cases be the right approach.
Yeah, and Josh, when it comes to this, the kind of the friendly educational letter, Velcro Companies does a lot of direct business, but we also have a lot of indirect customers, right? So we have distributors that actually distribute our product to additional companies or customers. And so sometimes we may find that someone is using our trademark and they actually may be a kind of downstream customer. We just don't have any record because they're not a direct customer. So we try to write our letters, our cease and desist letters, to be more friendly, because we don't want to offend someone who is actually using our trademark and should be using our trademark because they are selling Velcro brand products. And so our letters are more friendly, more, we may ask them, it may be that you're actually authorized to sell Velcro brand products. Please let us know, who your distributor is, et cetera. That way we can trace it back to our direct customer. And we find that that works the best because, again, it may be someone who is genuinely selling Velcro brand products. It may just be that they aren't a direct customer of ours. So the friendly approach really does work best for us.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so in terms of government agency policing, obviously, just like any brand owner, an owner of an at-risk mark, needs to monitor trademark applications, file oppositions, possibly cancellations for marks that contain or which are confusingly similar to at-risk marks, just as we would with any trademark. A related concern unique to at-risk marks is the need to watch for applications that include the mark in the goods and services description, which is not something that most trademark owners need to worry about. So in this case, informal outreach or demand letters can work. In the United States, there's a process called letters of protest, which may be appropriate. You send a letter of protest to the Commissioner of Trademarks, and the commissioner, if appropriate, will then forward the letter or forward the information onto the USPTO examining attorney that is examining the application that has the mark in the goods services description, and will ideally issue an office action or an examiner's amendment correcting the description. In some cases, more holistic approaches are necessary. For instance, we have had success in the past with letters to the USPTO Commissioner for Trademarks requesting sort of more robust examining attorney directives or education, so that office actions are automatically issued for improper trademark use in goods and services descriptions, without action by the trademark owner. Outside the US, there are similar types of processes available depending on the country. Sometimes there's nothing at all, and you just need to oppose or send demand letters, but options do vary.
And Josh, when we've had limited circumstances where we've had to deal with this, we find that sometimes, again, it's an educational opportunity because the applicant has put our trademark in the goods and services, and once we reach out to them directly, we can avoid opposition proceedings, because once we educate them about the Velcro trademark, they realize they should not have that, and so they will actually amend their application or pull it completely. With respect to the offices themselves, it depends on the office, right? Because we all know that the trademark offices around the world have different resources, have different amounts of staff. And so sometimes these things just kind of slip through the cracks. And it really is a great opportunity to communicate with the trademark office, as Josh mentioned, via one of those ways, either a letter, education. And I find that working with them directly and really kind of just mentioning, hey, did you know? Because clearly it's a trademark registered in their jurisdiction and it's not an intentional thing on their part. It's simply a matter of resource. And so reaching out and helping, offering a solution, education, I find that all works really well with some of these offices, and every one of them is eager and willing to correct the issue, and I think it just helps them become a better trademark office. So just having that mentality of working and collaboration really does solve the problem quickly.
That's right. That's right. Education often saves the day. Similarly, other types of government agency policing may be required. So, we've seen tax authorities in the past that have, for instance, promulgated lists of goods and services that include improperly the brand instead of the good, and in that case, you may have to customize your kind of approach depending on how best to contact the tax authority in a given country. It sometimes takes relationships and speaking to the right people.
Josh, I noticed we had a question. I just wanted to answer it because we're right on the topic. And the question is, how do you track if your trademark is being used in the goods and services description? Our watch services, you can actually have them watch either the trademark or watch the goods and services. And so they will track that. And if your trademark is being used in the goods and services description, you'll get an alert just as if it was a new trademark being that utilizes your trademark in kind of the trademark itself. So that's how we do it.
That's right. All right, let's move on to reference policing. So reference policing, I'm referring to strategically correcting public perception by appealing to reference authorities, so primarily dictionaries. So if a brand owner has a mark that is sometimes used as a generic term, it will sometimes be included in dictionaries. And it's important to identify those that don't, for whatever reason, properly define or identify the mark as a trademark. Very rarely can you get the word removed from the dictionary if it's used by the public in common parlance. However, the brand owner can send letters to dictionaries explaining the issue and requesting specific amendments to the definition to clarify that the distinctive nature of the mark. So results vary, but many dictionaries, and I would say most dictionaries, will at least add a term that says trademark or proprietary name, or will at least add the appropriate trademark symbol, usually the registered trademark symbol. This is easier in some jurisdictions, particularly where they have regulations requiring that dictionaries include indicators of trademark status, like the EU regulation seen here. So now let's turn to the fun part, Tish, which is educating the public. So let's start with educating the media, and then we'll move on to kind of educating the general public. So educating the media is tricky because unlike with competitors, unlike with infringement or misuse, there's not much leverage that you have over the media. So friendly educational letters are often appropriate when you identify a news article that uses the trademark incorrectly. Rarely is a media outlet actually going to correct an article, but it's not a bad idea to ask, particularly for an online article where which many are these days, where it's easier to issue an erratum or just make a kind of stealth correction. But I think generally speaking, the focus should be on future education and future mindfulness. Some trademark owners actually actively or try to actively educate on social media. For instance, here we have a Taser brand Some examples of Taser brand actually correcting different media outlets on Twitter when Taser is used generically. So there, on the right, you have the Daily Dot with an article that says Russians have a new roulette, and it involves a 10,000 volt Taser. And Taser immediately responded and said, this is not a Taser brand weapon. Taser is our company name, product name, and registered trademark. So there are many instances of this happening with Taser and other companies. Tish, has Velcro Companies considered this this kind of very active brand awareness via tweet approach?
Typically, we would not probably do our response this way. We may reach out individually. But the challenge with social media is it's usually not the legal department that's watching social media, right? So it's not trademark attorneys that are monitoring this. So we would rather have it come from any kind of response to the improper use of our brand or our trademark to come from the legal department, and let our marketing team do what they're best at, which is market, right? They're out there, they're trying to generate interest, etc. So typically our marketing team would bring something like this to our attention, and then we would reach out directly in the appropriate manner. That's not to say we wouldn't respond. It's going to depend a lot on what the context is, and whether we think we can do it in a way that's not because sometimes you can be perceived as being, the 100-pound gorilla, or, you're stifling somebody who's just giving a comment. So all those PR concerns that you've talked about or mentioned, we're going to be very mindful of that. And we think probably there's a better way to reach out and educate people about the proper use of our trademark.
Right. So let's turn to educating the general public by coming right out and addressing the issue. And let's look at a few examples, that some of which you'll recognize. So here we have what I think is probably the most famous example of an anti-genericide campaign, which is Xerox's kind of multimedia campaign in the late 80s and early 90s, when Xerox was used as a close to a synonym for copy machine, and to copy. It was used as a verb and as a noun. So here you have one of the articles that Xerox published in a magazine or maybe a newspaper that says, when you use Xerox the way you use aspirin, we get a headache. Clearly published in the US and invoking a famously dead US brand. Here's another one. I know it's hard for some of us to imagine, but apparently Frigidaire was so well known in the early 1900s that some bold anti-genericide advertising was necessary. So here you have the word Frigidaire always ends with a capital R, referring to the R in a circle registered trademark symbol. And here we have something a little closer to our generation, Tish, which is a rollerblade ad. So you inline skating fans will appreciate this ad that basically says that it's incorrect to use the term rollerblading as a generic term. Rollerblade is, of course, a brand for inline skates. I guess the overall takeaway from these campaigns is that they tend to be bold, they tend to be clear, and they tend to be pretty expensive. So Tish, I guess kind of one question that folks have is that, can these campaigns backfire, or by the time they are kind of put out, is all publicity good publicity?
Well, as you're about to see, we're going to talk about the Don't Say Velcro campaign. And even when we found, even when people didn't really like the campaign or didn't like what we did, they remembered the message. And so if the campaign is done correctly, if the campaign is done well, I think that even for those who don't like the campaign or maybe don't like the message, you still get the benefit of educating them to the proper use of the trademark, and it's going to be ingrained whether you realize it or not. And you'll see when we show the Don't Say Velcro video, you're going to get a song in your head, and I challenge you to get it out. So I'm not saying there can't be, some kind of, that they're always going to be good. But I think if you're working with a professional company, you do it in the right way. You think about, what is your goal with the education campaign, and you do it properly. I do think that you're going to get a lot of education out of it, even if the campaign itself isn't necessarily everyone's cup of tea.
I agree. So let's turn to the Don't Say Velcro campaign. Most of you have probably heard of the Don't Say Velcro campaign. Here are a few vital stats. Tish?
So obviously our key objective was we wanted to maximize the impact, reach as many people as possible via social media, sharing, and also through earned media. It's also one of the first trademark campaigns to fully embrace digital and social media tools. And that's key, because even if we're talking about, as you saw with the Xerox company campaign, that was mostly print ad, but that was the time, right? That's what was available. Right now, if you're not really focused on social media and other kinds of digital media, it's going to be challenging to ensure that your message is heard. And so that's why we embraced both of those. It was developed and produced in partnership with a Raleigh-based agency called Walk West and their creative consultant, Penn Holderness, who is a renowned vlogger and a content creator. And he's noted for featuring his family in creative videos about Christmas jammies. So finding somebody who's creative and has a vision, I think really worked well for us.
I agree. So let's look at, we're actually going to go through each of these components. So we'll skip this slide and let's watch the video. If I can figure out how to. There we go.
We're a company that's so successful that everywhere you go, you see the scratchy, hairy fastener, and you say,
"Hey, that's Velcro!"
But even though we invented this stuff, our patent lapsed 40 years ago. Now no matter who else makes it,
you still wanna call it Velcro.
You think it's awesome for us, we're famous, but we're lawyers and it's causing us grief. Cause there are trademark laws being broken. It's all here in this short legal brief.
And we know that this is confusing because Velcro Brand is who we are.
But if you call it all Velcro,
we're gonna lose our circled arm.
This is called hook and loop. This part's a hook, this part's a loop. You call it Velcro, but we're begging you. This is f***ing hook and loop.
we know this seems ridiculous. This is a first world situation.
And we made $500 million last year.
I went to turn to my last vacation.
And we're asking you not to say her name. We took 60 plus years to build. But if you keep calling these Velcro shoes, our trademark will get killed. Yeah!
We aren't just doing this for us. We're doing it for all the successful brands that got so popular, people started using the brand names the wrong way. So please, remember.
If you need something to clean up your socks, do it with bleach and not with If you have blood from a boo-boo you made, this is a bandage and not a If you're exercising with someone you're dating, it's in life skating and not I know that bleach stuff is more fun to say, but if you keep doing it, our trademarks go away.
This is called hook and loop. This part's a hook, this part's a loop. You call it Velcro, but we're begging you. This is f***ing hook and loop.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And just in case you didn't notice, Josh is actually in that video. So hopefully you spotted him in the back.
Real quick, while we're on that note, CLE code, real quickly, the CLE code for this session is D X, 5, Y, A. D as in donkey, X as in Xerox, bleep. 5, Y as in youthful, A as in athletic. Carry on.
All right. Thank you, Bree. All right. The slides have now disappeared. So
can you see those, Josh? Are the
I
slides
can.
back?
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you. All right. So that was the video. I think it was viewed something like several 100,000 times within the first week, I think, which is great. I was in that video, and let me tell you, the song is pretty catchy when you hear it now, but after you've sung it 200 times in 4 or 5 hours, slightly less so. So a few days later, the campaign staged a sort of social media takeover, where the Velcro Brand folks and the creative folks at Walk West kind of teamed up to respond to tweets via music, which was very cool. Another aspect to the social media takeover was the brand directly responding to probably hundreds of interested consumers and trolls by correcting their usage, including kind of animated GIFs of lawyers acting outraged or confused or approving as needed. So that was an engagement campaign.
We also actually have a website that's still up to this day. It's called don'tsayvelcro.com. And on that page, you can actually see the videos. You can also learn more about the proper use of our trademark, such as, never a noun, never a verb, always on brand. There's quizzes you can take. We tried to make this as fun and interactive as possible to go along with what we think is a very fun campaign. And we found that it just, if you're reaching out to general consumers and you're kind of just talking at them, you're not going to get the same kind of response as if you're engaging them. And so that's what we hoped to do with this campaign and with this website.
Yeah, and so ads with shorter versions of the video were also deployed on social media in various forms. Not unexpectedly, while the original video was well received by many, other reactions, and particularly, as you might imagine, the YouTube comments ranged from, I would say, indignant to outright hostile. One comment that I recall vowed never to use the term hook and loop, and to teach their children and their children's children never to use the term hook and loop. So in response, the team very quickly put together another video, which I will try to play right now.
Velcro Companies made a video telling you that this is hook and loop and not Velcro.
Now we know our message has been heard. Thanks to all your comments and your big colorful words.
Who are all these f***ing clowns? An angry viewer asked us. Kevin says, please hook and loop your heads out of your asses. This guy really hates our lawyers and our trademark rights. Sean, he called us immoral, grasping parasites. Thank you so much for all your feedback.
The worst sound ever.
So glad that you took the time to write.
Even though 104 times.
Even though you didn't love the message. Lots of you are now getting it right.
As long as you know that it's hook and loop on those store shelves.
It's okay, this English dude wants us to sue ourselves. Fuck their hooks, fuck their loops, Mr. Banana wrote. Hey, at least they said hook and loop together in that quote.
We hear you, people of the world. Thousands of comments from 150 countries as far away as China, where they told us Velcro means powerful hook. And here in America, where they asked us politely to please die of genocide.
Your words mean so much to us, especially those who are constructive, offering other possible names for hook and loop. And here they are.
Friction fuzz.
That's pretty clever.
Click butts.
Oh yeah, whatever.
Fur tape.
I think that's a maybe.
Rip to strip.
That's a little bit shady.
It's scratch and
That
France.
works for me.
This is what they call it in Germany.
Clever schlossen.
Yeah.
Slush.
Clever slush.
Romanian translation.
Hedgehog.
Smell crow.
Yeah, that's awesome, dog.
Root tuba
That
pow.
has a nice ring.
Woolen claw.
That's marketing.
Grippy grass.
That's not bad.
Thunder scenes.
That's the best one you guys had.
Thank you so much for all your feedback. But look and loop, we're gonna stick with it. Hope that you all liked our second video. And don't think it's a forced pile of shit.
Okay, one more time. That CLE code is DX5YA. DX5YA. Okay, carry on.
All right, thank you. So I think that goes back to the original question, which is, can this backfire? And certainly, there were some folks who did not receive the first video all that well. However, there was some really good interaction, and I think the overall takeaway is that the message was received loud and clear.
Right. Even if you didn't like it, even if, as you noticed in some of those comments, they still got hook and loop in their responses, which was the goal, right? So yes, not everyone's going to like it, but I do think it did its job.
Yep. So the campaign also included sponsored advertising, where if someone looked up something like Velcro shoes, they'd get a sponsored ad that said, "Did you mean hook and loop? Our lawyers are upset. Don't say Velcro." There were interactions with other brands. Here you have Jacuzzi, Xerox, and Lycra all kind of shouting out, interacting with Velcro Brand in a very or relatively organic way, I would say, which is really neat. There were also just kind of regular interactions with consumers, where the team kind of went online with an intent to kind of positively reinforce on Twitter. So Tish, do you want to just discuss briefly the kind of success of the campaign by the numbers?
Right. So, this is what's really going to get your attention. We had over 4 million views across all social media, 6.8 million digital impressions, 1 million engagements, 900 plus million media impressions, and that's print, online, television, and radio. It was picked up by all the major media outlets. Anderson Cooper talked about us. It just kind of took on a life of its own. It was number 14 trending on YouTube. We had engagement in China, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And we had tons of requests to use the video for CLE, for legal podcast presentations. I still get requests to this day of companies wanting to use the video in their own training programs when they're training trademark people or media people, marketing people about the proper use of trademarks. So I can tell you this campaign happened in 2017. I wasn't actually at Velcro Companies yet. I knew of the campaign. And even when I go out today and introduce myself as from Velcro Companies, the first question I get is always, "Oh, the video, how's that going?" People always still want to talk about the video. So, it won numerous awards. The video actually did. So overall, I would say that this was a huge success in educating everyone, including the trademark community, about the proper use of our trademark.
Agreed. So let's turn to our final topic in the last couple of minutes, educating the company. Tish, I know this is an issue near and dear to your heart. So tell us about anti-genericide work from the inside.
Well, fortunately, we don't really call it that. We just call it simply trademark education. But you know, you've got to have buy-in from basically everyone in your company when you're trying to use your trademark correctly, because as Josh mentioned, one of the ways that can get you in trouble is if someone from your company is misusing your trademark. And it may not always be, you know, obvious to a non-trademark professional how to use the trademark correctly. So it all starts from the top with the C-suite, because of course they control the money. And so they have to be part of that desire to want to do the educational campaign to ensure that, you know, you're doing the training efforts within the company. And so, and they also actually are out there doing interviews representing the company. And so it's key that the C-suite level of managers and professionals understands the proper use of the trademark and what the goal is, as far as educating everyone about it. Marketing, PR, and the brand, we obviously, they're key because they're developing and implementing company-wide brand strategies across all the products and the media channels. You know, so they've got packaging, websites, press releases, all of that. So having marketing on board and understanding the proper use of your trademark and having the buy-in, because obviously the marketing team doesn't like the additional word brand used because that takes up space, but they realize the importance of it and what the goal is. And so getting that buy-in is key to have that successful educational campaign. The sales team, who's your front line, they're the ones out talking with customers, representing your brand on the front lines. They need to understand why it's so important to use the trademark correctly, and they need to use the trademark correctly. And again, it may not be obvious necessarily to the sales team because they're out there just trying to sell, which is their job. But it's important that they understand why we are reaching out to customers and ensuring they're using our trademarks correctly. And so that buy-in is key as well. And then other employees, whether you're having direct communications with customers, regardless of what you're doing, it's important that everyone in the company understands the proper use of the trademark. We actually do new hire training, and we have trademark training as part of that, so that every employee that comes in, even if you're working a machine in the factory, you understand what the goal is with our trademark training, what the point of using the trademark correctly is. And actually, our employees are some of our biggest, they go out and they find incorrect usages. They're the ones reporting a lot of these infringements because they're so in tune with the fact that the trademark is so important to our company. So it really is a great way to connect and get that brand loyalty started with all employees. So the next piece is, obviously you've educated your company, you now have to educate affiliates of it as well. So if you do any sales and marketing via third parties, as I mentioned, we have distributors. It's critically important that we have agreements with them that explains the clear trademark usage guidelines and what our expectations are. We do approve all uses of our trademark. So if they're creating new collateral, new point of sale materials, etc., we are looking at that to ensure that we're using the trademark correctly, or that they are. And we have to maintain some flexible strategies in foreign distribution channels. As we mentioned, you know, it may not have this, there may not be the same trademark considerations in other jurisdictions, but there's always an opportunity for proper use and education. And it shouldn't really matter where you are in the world. You want everyone to use your trademark correctly. So while we may take into account cultural differences, translation differences, obviously when you're translating hook and loop into a foreign language, there may be some considerations, but we work with, you know, counsel in those countries to overcome those, to ensure that we're getting the right translations, we're taking into consideration cultural differences, so that we can make sure that our trademark is being used correctly.
All right. So on behalf of Tish and myself, thank you very much for joining us today. That's the end of our formal presentation. If you have any questions, I think we have 10 minutes for further discussion, and you can input your questions into the chat boxes of whatever program that you're using to access the webinar, and they should be sent over to us. So we have one here. What if your brand is registered but descriptive, i.e. on the supplemental register? How would educating the media efforts change, if at all? So I think it's important to distinguish between, so these are two very different situations. On the one hand, you have the specter of genericide exists when a brand, a clearly protectable, enforceable, and with a mark that is without question a trademark, starts to become used as a generic term. In that case, you're starting from a position of strength and something's chipping away at your strength. And the goal is to educate the public to help, and educate the media to help preserve the foundation of the trademark right. When we're talking about a descriptive term, whether it's registered on the supplemental register or not, which has no real bearing on the question of descriptiveness, there your goal is different. Your goal is to maintain a certain level of substantially continuous and substantially exclusive use, such that you have an argument that in the future your mark has acquired distinctiveness or acquired secondary meaning. In that case, it's probably less. I mean, certainly educating the media may be an important component, though if your term is so prevalent that it is already used by the media, then I'm afraid to say that that it's much more difficult to climb that hill and establish distinctiveness than it is to already have the distinctiveness. And I'm not saying it's harder to actually acquire distinctiveness than it is to not fall into genericide, but it's a different type of challenge. Let's put it that way. Tish, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you're dead on. I mean, I think it's challenging because when you're on the supplemental register, because you have not demonstrated that secondary meaning that allows you to be inherently distinctive onto the principal register, I do think you're fighting a different battle. And so educating the media, I think those efforts are different because, again, you're coming from a position of, I'm a trademark owner, here is my trademark that is registered on the principal register, and here's why you need to use it properly, versus I'm on the supplemental register, I don't have that inherent distinctiveness yet. I think it's a different education. I just think there might be other challenges.
So let's see, another question is, can we talk about the USPTO objections these days? They seem to be claiming marks are generic and not even registrable on the supplemental when the words are indeed descriptive. So yeah, I think this is a frustration that that most brand owners and certainly most trademark lawyers share, which is that, at least in my experience, I am receiving on behalf of my clients more refusals based on, so I think generally there are more refusals based on descriptiveness, just highly descriptiveness, genericness, and kind of informational, non-functional, failure to function refusals. I agree that the USPTO has, in the relatively recent past, created this sort of category between descriptive marks, descriptive terms, and generic terms, which is marks that are descriptive, without a doubt descriptive. They are not generic. They don't identify a genus of goods, but they are the language that the USPTO uses when issuing the refusal is that the mark is so highly descriptive that we will not permit registration on the supplemental register, or the mark is so highly descriptive that we will not accept 5 years of substantially exclusive and continuous use as evidence that the mark has become distinctive. I agree that that seems to be a trend. I think in some cases the trend is probably correct. I think that I find it frustrating, though. I think that the trend is probably correct because in many cases, 5 years is just not going to be enough, and I think it's fine for the USPTO to use whatever authority it has to kind of nip that in the bud, and I think that puts us more on foot with the treatment by other trademark offices, including the EU IPO, which tends to be fairly strict in the context of non-distinctiveness refusals. But I do share your frustration, particularly with generic, claiming that a mark is generic when it is not. And I think that I think you would find that if more applicants filed ex parte appeals in those cases, that the applicant would probably succeed because the bar to refuse on the basis of genericness is pretty high, and examiners frequently do not put in enough evidence to support that finding. So appeals, I think you would find would be successful. Let's see, we have a couple minutes left. Do we have any other questions? So here's one. How often do parties actually send letters in genericism cases to dictionary publishers? I'm wondering if it is worth it for a party to incur the expense in a TTAB proceeding of issuing subpoenas out of a district court in such type of case absent a published definition referencing a trademark. So I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. I mean, as to the first question, I honestly don't know how often parties send letters to dictionary publishers. I would imagine that owners of trademarks that are protectable trademarks, yet they find they are in dictionaries, meaning they are common enough in the colloquial parlance to show up in at least some online dictionaries. If they are concerned about their trademark rights, and they are taking steps to maintain the distinctiveness of the brand, then they will probably be sending letters to those dictionaries. As I mentioned earlier, the dictionaries, the amount of success is going to vary, and almost certainly you're not going to be able to remove a mark from a dictionary by sending a cease and desist letter or asking nicely. Most dictionaries, their position is, listen, if we see people using it at a level high enough, past a certain threshold that it's become a word, we're going to include it. However, if you are persuasive, then you can request successfully that the dictionary add indicators that the mark is a brand, whether it's a registered trademark symbol, whether it's the term trademark, whether it's the term registered trademark. In some foreign dictionaries, you'll find foreign language variations of these terms, or the trademark symbol or the registered trademark symbol. Yeah, Tish, anything to add in terms of kind of aggressiveness and frequency of sending letters to dictionaries?
Yeah, I think it's not even just only in the case of a genericism issue, but it's anytime, a trademark, because if you think about, for instance, examples like Wikipedia, that's just kind of community sourced. And so even if it's a trademark, you're likely to have an entry in Wikipedia or even in other dictionaries because the trademark is so famous and popular that it will be entered. So it's not really just necessarily about genericism. I think as a trademark owner, you have to be thoughtful about the fact that we live in a world where information is in a lot of different places, and it can be put up easily, not necessarily just by, you know, a dictionary itself, but by other users. And so as a trademark owner, you do need to police all of those and find creative ways to engage with those online sources or other sources, dictionaries, to educate them about your trademark.
Agreed. Bree?
All right, wonderful.
Take it away, Bree.
Thank you both so very much. This was wonderful and enlightening and amusing. And we will all have those songs stuck in our heads for weeks. So thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
It was truly lovely. Thank you so very much. Up next at 2:15 Eastern Time, we have the wow factor, differentiating yourself and your legal practice, and at home and abroad, building and protecting a strong international brand. To go to either of those, you're going to go to the schedule page and choose which session to attend and join from there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you so much, Josh and Tish. This was wonderful. And now we know, I think everybody in the audience mostly just spent their time writing down word for word everything you said. So thank you so very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bree. Glad to be here.
Us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.